Homage to fundamental teacher Buddha Shakyamuni, homage to wisdom warrior Manjushri, homage to all lineage benevolent masters. The Dharma, infinitely profound and subtle, is rarely encountered even in 1,000,000 eons. Now we are able to hear, study, and follow it. May we fully realize Tathagata's true meaning. In order to liberate all sentient beings from samsara, generate supreme bodhicitta. Now we will teach the 5th common preliminary practice in the words of my perfect teacher. We have already covered precious human life, impermanence, the defects of samsara, and the principle of cause and effect. Now we will teach the 5th topic, the benefits of liberation and how to follow a spiritual friend. Basically, these will be combined into one content for explanation. First, the author pays homage to his root guru, cared for by many accomplished masters and scholars, practicing according to the guru's instructions. Showing the unmistaken path of liberation to all, I prostrate at the feet of my peerless guru. The meaning of this verse is that the author, Patrul Rinpoche, respectfully prostrates to his root guru, Jigme Gyalwai Nyugu, and the lineage masters with utmost reverence. His guru was compassionately cared for by accomplished masters and scholars throughout the ages. Moreover, the guru himself relied on the instructions of these masters, practicing properly and diligently according to their guidance, ultimately generating genuine wisdom of selflessness in his mind stream and realizing the true nature of all phenomena. Such a path of liberation that he personally realized he teaches without error to sentient beings. With the proper conditions, I prostrate at the feet of such a spiritual teacher with supreme wonderful qualities. We followers also often use this verse before our great benevolent root guru and all lineage masters to pay homage, take refuge, make offerings, and so forth. We can recite it, visualize with it, and often use this verse to generate incomparable joy, faith, and prayer toward the lineage masters in our mind stream. Now we explain the benefits of liberation, divided into the definition of liberation and classifications of liberation. The definition of liberation, so-called liberation, means escaping from the great ocean of suffering that is samsara and obtaining any one of the fruit stages, Shravaka, Pratyeka Buddha, or perfect Buddhahood. Actually, we should know that so-called liberation fundamentally means generating renunciation toward the entire 6 realms of samsara. Then, as explained in 3 principal aspects of the path renunciation, bodhicitta, and non-dual wisdom, using these 3 essential paths to eliminate all opposing factors in one's mind stream, ultimately obtaining to different degrees either the Shravaka fruition or the Pratyeka Buddha fruition or perfect Buddhahood. Any one of these fruitions can actually be called liberation. Why? Because they have already departed from afflictions and from all sufferings of the 3 realms of samsara, so it can be called liberation. Of course, in the mundane world, there are also some definitions. For example, when a person comes out of prison, this is also called a kind of liberation. When a person is liberated from the entanglement of illness, this can also be called liberation. Or when a person is released from a predicament without freedom, this is also called liberation. But these liberations are called similar liberations. True liberation is when all afflictions, seeds, and all causes of suffering in our mind stream are completely eliminated one by one. Only then can it be called true liberation. Therefore, we should have an aspiration for liberation from the depths of our hearts. Otherwise, we cannot be called true practitioners. Every practitioner must understand content we teach in the words of my perfect teacher. First, from the textual level, then contemplate its meaning. The meaning you understand must be continuously familiarized and practiced in your mind stream. Otherwise, if we leave all the theory we understand in books when you open the book, or when the teacher is explaining to you, you seem to have a feeling that it's quite good, but once you close the book, or when the book is not with you, if your mental attitude remains exactly the same as usual, then we are not true practitioners. So whether in the words of my perfect teacher or other teachings, actually, every instruction that is taught can nourish our mind stream and will definitely have inconceivable blessings and benefits. But the key is that some people can completely resolve the afflictions in their mind stream by relying on these books and instructions. Some people say that although they have been studying and contemplating for years, when they truly need to counter their afflictions and struggle with them, they often fail to engage in battle with mindfulness and vigilance. As a result, their mental attitude can never overcome all afflictions and sufferings. Therefore, everyone here in the process of practice, even if you listen to just one class each day, you should have a summary of the content taught in that one class. For example, we previously taught the 4 common preliminaries. After the 4 common preliminaries are finished, you yourself should consciously summarize, without others urging, what kind of content was taught in general in the principle of cause and effect. What help and benefit do the stories and instructions taught therein have for my mental attitude? What kind of mental attitude did I have before? What kind of path should I take in the future? So as a wise person, you should examine yourself in all aspects and observe your own mind. This point is indispensable for a practitioner. So here we first need to understand liberation. Now, some Buddhists and practitioners say repeatedly that they want to seek liberation, but do they truly seek the path to liberation from their hearts? I'm afraid some people to this day have never even thought about the meaning of so-called liberation in their hearts. The classifications of liberation include the causes of liberation and the fruits of liberation, the 3 enlightenments. First, starting from precious human life, taming one's mind stream with the practice of the 4 thoughts that turn the mind away from samsara, then starting from refuge, which is the foundation of all holy paths, until the main practice of the holy path is completely perfected. Each practice has its own merits, as already explained in the previous text, and later, such as refuge, generating bodhicitta, vajrasattva, practice, mandala offerings, etc. Each instruction basically introduces its benefits and merits later on. So we start from the basics, that is, the 4 common preliminaries. Especially the 4 thoughts that turn the mind away from samsara are very important. This is the foundation of all practice, regarding precious human life, impermanence, the defects of samsara, and karmic cause and effect. You must generate genuine, authentic renunciation in your mind stream. If you don't have renunciation toward this life, all other practices simply cannot be undertaken. Even the highest great perfection, Mahamudra, great Yamantaka, and great Madhyamaka, as well as the various profound teachings of Chan and Pure Land schools, if you haven't established the previous foundation, well, all these practices will become causes for this life. Only causes for this life and causes for future lives have a very big difference. So according to the instructions of many experienced masters with realization, first use the 4 preliminaries to see through this life. If you haven't seen through it, indeed, your future practice will not be stable. The states of practice will not be long-lasting either. Therefore, we must know here first use the common preliminaries as the foundation. Then each practice of the uncommon preliminaries has some different main practices. All of these must be understood and known. If you truly understand these teachings, then the causes of liberation can be complete. So the entire content of the words of my perfect teacher from beginning to end is the complete and perfect cause of liberation for those who wish to be liberated, because it clearly explains the basic path of avoiding evil and practicing virtue. If this is the case, it brings people close to liberation. The Sutra of the Right Mindfulness of Dharma also says this: if a person stays away from all evil deeds and delights in practicing virtuous Dharma, this person will always be happy in the present world and will certainly attain the fruit of nirvana and liberation. If someone stays away from all evil deeds and delights in practicing all virtuous Dharma, such a person will temporarily be happy for a long time in this very life, in the present world, and in future lives will definitely attain nirvana and liberation. Therefore, we must know the importance of practicing the 4 preliminaries. We have also repeatedly and in great detail introduced the content of the 4 preliminaries to everyone. I believe many people will also value the 4 preliminaries. If you don't value them, the path you follow will probably not be very stable. Generally speaking, many people in our mundane world are unwilling to practice the 4 preliminaries. They practice Qigong, yoga visualizing bindus, Buddha, images, letters. They like to practice all these. But I feel this kind of practice is not very difficult. However, for my mind stream to truly become a practitioner, I'm afraid if you haven't generated genuine certainty about precious human life, impermanence, etc., without generating authentic understanding, these practices will not last long. Therefore, everyone must make efforts again to understand the causes of liberation. Second, the fruits of the three enlightenments. Whether obtaining Shravaka, Pratyeka Buddha, or perfect Buddhahood, any one of these three fruitions is peaceful and cool. Whether Hinayana fruits or Mahayana fruits, they have all departed from the burning heat of the three realms of samsara and are peaceful and cool because they have escaped from the narrow path of samsaric suffering. I am truly overjoyed. We should think like this. Today I have encountered such wonderful Dharma, I will definitely be liberated in the future. When liberated, it won't be like now, where we cry and weep every day, having countless, endless torments and sufferings. It won't be like this. We should be joyful. Especially now that we have encountered Mahayana Buddhism, we should naturally seek only perfect Buddhahood, diligently practicing the 10 virtues, cultivating the 4 immeasurables, 6 perfections, 4 meditative concentrations, 4 formless states, calm abiding and insight, and all other practices embraced by the 3 supreme methods, excellent motivation in the preliminary stage, non-conceptual main practice, and dedication in the concluding stage, practicing them in reality. Especially in this very lifetime, we have encountered such wonderful Mahayana spiritual teachers and Dharma, so our entire goal is to obtain the fruition of perfect Buddhahood. As for the content of our practice, of course we have previously introduced the 10 virtues, the 4 immeasurables, love, compassion, joy, and equanimity, will be introduced later, and the 6 perfections and the perfection of wisdom will also be introduced. Then the 4 meditative concentrations, 4 formless realms, and calm abiding and insight, these have all been taught more or less before. These practices are first embraced by bodhicitta, then when practice without being turned by adverse conditions. Finally, dedicate for the benefit of all sentient beings. In this way, in the future, we will definitely obtain excellent fruition. So we have talked about the foundation of Buddhism. Finally, we must understand obtaining such fruits. Just like when a person wants to do anything, first there are preceding prerequisites, or there is an antecedent cause. Later, there is the goal to be achieved, there is a result. Antecedent causes and results exist for anything, so everyone here is a seeker of liberation. In this case, we must understand what the causes of seeking liberation are. Finally, our desired goal is the fruit of liberation. Both of these are particularly important. In this way, we first start from renunciation. All of samsara is suffering, all sensations are suffering, all phenomena are impermanent, ultimately reaching the selfless state of peace. This can be said to be the summary of the 84,000 teachings I remember during the Tang dynasty, translated by Master Yi Jing. There was a particularly short sutra called The Questions of the Naga King Sutra. The Buddha at that time had 1,250 disciples and bodhisattvas. He taught them the Dharma at that time in the Dragon Palace. A Naga king requested that the Buddha use particularly simple language, a simple and practical teaching with very rich content. Could such an instruction be taught to us? Later the Buddha said, all conditioned things are impermanent, everything is suffering. The 4 Dharma seals we usually speak of, all conditioned things are impermanent, everything is suffering, all phenomena are selfless, nirvana is bliss. This is the Questions of the Naga King Sutra. This sutra is very short, yet the Buddha said if you frequently recite and practice this sutra, then its merit is equal to the 84,000 teachings. So ordinarily, if we don't have time to recite the great sutras, I hope the verse we just mentioned is very simple. All conditioned things are impermanent, everything is suffering, all phenomena are selfless, nirvana is bliss. Such a simple verse, I think everyone should often recite it once daily. That should be no problem. If you put this in your daily recitations, this is what the Buddha said. The Buddha said it summarizes the 84,000 teachings. Actually, these 4 Dharma seals of the Buddha are truly so. When you first contemplate, all phenomena are impermanent, all sensations are suffering, then they are selfless. finally understanding that the state of selflessness is peaceful bliss, having completely severed all sufferings and obtained nirvana. The liberation spoken of here is actually peaceful bliss. Having reached such a state, the ultimate goal of all beings in the three realms can be said to be ultimately reaching such a fruition of peaceful bliss. This is the fruit of liberation. Therefore, all virtuous practices we perform are embraced by bodhicitta, ultimately obtaining liberation, such an excellent fruition. This is very important. Therefore, we practitioners, everyone must not make mistakes. The goal and positioning must never be wrong. If it's wrong, everything is futile, without real meaning. So here we briefly introduce the guidance on the benefits of liberation. Then what will we introduce next? The sixth topic, how to follow a spiritual friend, divided into two parts. First, the necessity of following a guru and the stages of following a guru. First, we explain the necessity of following a guru. In all sutras, tantras, and treatises, it has never been mentioned that there is any history of becoming a Buddha without following a guru. There is no history of becoming a Buddha without following a spiritual teacher, for example, including our great teacher Buddha Shakyamuni in the past also made offerings and generated bodhicitta before the great Buddha Shakyamuni, looking at all of history, all past Buddhas in different places, followed spiritual teachers and after receiving many instructions, ultimately obtained accomplishment. In our real life, we can also see this clearly. There is not a single person who generates the qualities of the 5 paths and 10 stages through self-creation and having courage and insight, not even one. All practitioners and great accomplished masters, these masters throughout history, whether in India, Tibet, China, or in other countries, in any place, all relied on spiritual teachers and served spiritual teachers and thereby obtained true fruition. The flower ornament. Sutra states, there is a quotation in the flower ornament sutra. In the 10 directions of the Dharma realm, all the Buddha's teachings, if you serve spiritual teachers, you can enter them all. To truly realize all the Buddha's teachings in the worlds of the 10 directions, you must first follow and serve spiritual teachers. Only then can you truly enter the great ocean of Buddha Dharma and obtain the wish-fulfilling jewel of accomplishment. We have already explained before. Any school should know the importance of following spiritual teachers. Some narrow-minded and ignorant people have said before that in Tibetan Buddhism, following spiritual teachers is highly emphasized, and in Tibetan Buddhism, the guru is viewed as a Buddha. This kind of statement is unreasonable. Therefore, they use the biography of Milarepa and other biographies of some masters in history as examples to refute this. Actually, they themselves are truly pitiable because when some people speak wrong teachings through articles and other means, when they speak wrong teachings, those who blindly follow, lacking wisdom and maturity, also rush after them. This possibility exists. Actually, they themselves have never read the great sutras and treatises and have never truly understood the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha personally said, "In the future I will transform into spiritual teachers to guide sentient beings." In our Tibetan Buddhist translations, there are many quotations from Indian translations. I see that in Chinese texts. In the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, it's exactly the same as what's taught in Tibetan Buddhism. What does it say? I will also manifest in Jambudvipa as a teacher. I will transform into a spiritual teacher in Jambudvipa to teach the immature and make them abide in the true Dharma. I will teach the immature and make them abide in the true Dharma. Actually, from this scriptural citation, we can see that the Buddha will manifest in the world in the future, appearing as spiritual teachers to liberate sentient beings. At that time, the Buddha also told his disciples not to weep. In the future degenerate age, I will manifest as spiritual teachers to teach you all. The content spoken is exactly the same. So if we don't have genuine spiritual teachers, no matter how capable we are ourselves, there's simply no way to achieve the qualities of the 5 paths and 10 stages, not to mention actualizing the qualities of the 5 paths and 10 stages, even studying the 5 great treatises, including some terms and practices in the words of my perfect teacher. They wouldn't understand these either. Some of our Dharma friends in the past were quite arrogant, thinking that self-study should be no problem. But because they lacked the instructions and guidance of spiritual teachers, ultimately they never truly mastered the real content. So in Buddhism, spiritual teachers are indeed particularly important. Without the guidance of spiritual teachers, although some scriptures say that every sentient being possesses the Tathagata's nature, it cannot be realized. It seems to be taught in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra because they cannot approach spiritual teachers, although they have Buddha nature, they cannot see it. Because they cannot approach spiritual teachers, although every sentient being has Buddha nature, without such knowledge and pith instructions they cannot see it. If one truly wants to realize the profound teachings of all Buddha Dharma spiritual teachers are essential. If you wish to achieve omniscient wisdom, you should definitely seek true spiritual teachers. This seems to be taught in the Flower Ornament Sutra. Actually, the Flower Ornament Sutra teaches many things about viewing spiritual teachers as Buddhas. When spiritual teachers are pleased, Buddhas are pleased. When spiritual teachers are pleased, all accomplishments can be achieved. When spiritual teachers are pleased, qualities in one's mind stream can manifest, and so forth. There are many scriptural citations. So some of you here who have many conceptual thoughts must first know that if you don't rely on Buddha Dharma, that's another matter. In our mundane world, there are materialists, followers of Ishvara, and various kinds of heretical non-Buddhist schools, some of whom believe, including some people nowadays who think that gurus and disciples are equal, teachers and students are also equal, etc. There are many theories of equality speaking such theories. For them, gold and stones are probably the same, fathers and sons are also the same. In that case, there probably wouldn't be any distinction between superior and inferior in the entire world. But I think that, conventionally speaking, there should be some levels. Therefore, some content taught in our Buddhism cannot go too far beyond such boundaries. This is a fault brought by contamination of conceptual fabrication. Therefore, we must first understand that following spiritual teachers is particularly important. All sentient beings, including ourselves, are quite accomplished in wrong paths, but regarding the holy path of liberation and omniscience, like helpless blind people lost in an empty wilderness, we know very little. We people nowadays are all particularly skilled at creating negative karma. All the components may be completely perfect. In the mundane world, regarding animals, hungry ghosts, we all have certain accomplishments in karmas created by greed, anger, and ignorance. But regarding liberation, everyone is particularly blind, equivalent to a helpless blind person in the wilderness doing nothing, oppressed by various sufferings. I remember it seems to be taught in the Sutra of the Great Assembly, because sentient beings' minds are disturbed, they fall into the river of birth and death. Like the blind who can see nothing, they are constantly drowned by suffering, meaning constantly drowned by suffering. The meaning is that sentient beings, because their minds are particularly scattered, fall into the river of birth and death in samsara, being carried away by the river of samsara, without freedom, like a blind person in the wilderness, who can see nothing, being tormented by various kinds of suffering, extremely painful. Moreover, there has never been an example of obtaining treasures from a wish-fulfilling jewel island without relying on a merchant guide. Therefore, spiritual teachers and good Dharma friends are the true guides to liberation and the Buddha path of omniscience. We must respectfully follow them. Without an experienced merchant guide, wish-fulfilling jewels are impossible to obtain. Similarly, without spiritual teachers and good friends, the path to liberation is very distant for you. Therefore, if we want liberation, we must follow spiritual teachers. The stages of following are divided into three aspects. First, examining the guru, then following the guru. Finally, studying the guru's intention and conduct. First, examining the guru. Ordinary people are naturally easily changed by companions and other temporary external conditions, so we need to follow good teachers and beneficial friends at all times and places. First, let me give an analogy. An ordinary piece of wood falling into the Sandalwood forest of Mount Malaya after many years will be infused with the wonderful fragrance of sandalwood. As a result, this ordinary piece of wood will naturally emit the fragrant scent of sandalwood. Similarly, if we follow a qualified great master and spiritual teacher, then, over time, we will also be infused with the wonderful fragrance of their qualities, and all our actions will become like theirs. Rigdzin Jigme Lingpa also says this in Treasury of Precious Qualities. Like in the Malaya forest, when an ordinary piece of wood falls, its branches and leaves become nourished with wonderful fragrance. Following the Guru, one emulates them. This has already been explained above. Malaya is a mountain in southern India. This mountain is entirely covered with sandalwood. If an ordinary piece of wood falls into this sandalwood after some time, it will all emit the fragrant scent. Similarly, an absolutely ordinary person in our mundane world, if they follow a spiritual teacher for a period of time, gradually they will obtain all the wonderful, fragrant qualities of this spiritual teacher. Then wherever they go, they can teach and expound the Dharma and can infuse others with their own qualities. So throughout history, many great masters and spiritual teachers also once followed many gurus. The guru's intention, the guru's conduct, the guru's qualities are obtained gradually, not in just a day or two. Students also need time to obtain qualities from their teachers. So generally speaking, the longer one follows a guru, the better, not like people nowadays. Oh, I'll request an empowerment today, request a teaching today, tomorrow, I'll leave and go back to work. I've now obtained the guru's intention. As long as the guru stamps it, that's enough. But this stamp, if it's for passing an exam or handling some procedures, then looking at the guru's stamp is sufficient. But to truly obtain the guru's qualities and instructions in one's mind stream, the longer the time, the better. Of course, in a short time one can also obtain supreme qualities, especially when the guru has the blessing power of realization, and the disciple also has karmic connections from past lives and uncommon faith. When such conditions come together, like the great masters throughout history, even brief encounters can generate incomparable realizations in the disciple's mind stream. Such phenomena indeed exist in history. But generally speaking, one should follow spiritual teachers and avoid bad friends. This point is also very important. It should be taught in the Sutra of the collection of the original acts of the Buddha. At that time, Nanda often ate, drank, and made merry with corrupt monks. The Buddha patiently gave him many instructions, but his mind stream remained stubborn and difficult to tame. Later, once the Buddha took Nanda to the city and entered a fish shop. In the fish shop, 100 fish were placed on grass. They had all rotted and were particularly smelly. At this time, the Buddha asked him to take a handful of grass. Nanda personally carried this grass and walked for some distance, then asked him to throw away the grass. Then he told him to smell what kind of odor his hands had. When he smelled, it was no different from the fish meat just now, particularly foul. Then he said it was particularly foul. The Buddha said following bad friends is the same. You just now, in such a short time, merely touched that grass and your hands became so smelly. Similarly, when we follow a bad friend, for example, today having contact with someone whose practice is not very good, some practitioners are particularly fond of music. Regarding music, today he comes over for a meal playing all kinds of chaotic music. Oh, you've been infected with his foul smell. From then on, you naturally every day, among some practitioners on our mountain now, sometimes when I pass by some people beside I feel very sorry for them. Why? Because some people from the cities haven't yet seen through the world. They have families, work units, many things. They haven't reached that level yet. So their not seeing through is understandable. But some in quiet places have already given up everything. Their hair is completely shaved, but every day they take a broken radio or broken tape recorder and listen. Click, click, click. How much better to enjoy some delicious taste in the Dharma meaning. But these are also related to bad friends. Particularly fond of various worldly TV and movies, especially some people whose previous lay habits are particularly heavy. After coming, although they temporarily heard some excellent instructions, their mind stream still cannot change. Their outer appearance is quite peaceful, like a renunciant, but their hearts, as taught in Letter to a Friend, there are 4 types of people who are outwardly mature but inwardly immature. Outwardly they look like they inspire faith in others, but inwardly, not to mention others, even they themselves generate disgust and aversion, so this is due to bad friends. Then, the Buddha took Nanda to another place. In a shop selling incense, he had him grab a handful of incense. After a while, he told him to put it down and smell his hand. At this time, there was a particularly good fragrance. Then the Buddha also said, "Following spiritual teachers is also like this. Following good friends is also like this. Although you follow briefly, the fragrant qualities in their mind stream you can naturally obtain in your own heart. This is truly so worldly people also say, those close to vermilion become red, those close to ink become black. Any environment's influence doesn't need a very long time, even briefly for a day or two, a month or 2 months. There's a definite difference between bad friends and good friends. Of course, for bodhisattvas who have attained the ground, some sutras say they are also influenced by environment and bad friends. Some say they are not influenced, whatever the case. Apart from this, for ordinary worldly people, the influence of good and bad friends will definitely exist. Now we are in the 5 turbidities of the degenerate age. Of course, gurus who possess all the qualifications taught in the many tantras are truly difficult to find. Such gurus are generally still very rare. Such gurus taught in all the tantras are definitely very rare. But what should we follow? We must follow gurus who possess the basic conditions and qualifications. Below we will first examine the guru. Before hearing teachings, before following, we must first examine if we don't examine. Now in the degenerate age, not knowing what the guru is like, not even recognizing the guru before following, I've met some people who say, "I'm going for empowerment." I ask, "Do you know that guru?" "No, but they're all going, so I'm going too. I received many empowerments. Very happy, very joyful. Oh, this place is so excellent. The guru is so wonderful." I ask, "Why? What qualities does the guru have?" Anyway, I feel this guru is so compassionate. When I look at his face, I particularly like it. Is this the guru's qualification? A guru who can be followed must possess the following qualities. First, we should examine whether the guru possesses these qualifications. First, pure mind stream. What is pure mind stream? Never having violated pratimoksha vows, inner bodhisattva vows, and Vajrayana Samaya vows. The first basic condition for a guru is definitely possessing pratimoksha vows. If a monastic, all the pratimoksha vows of monastics. If a layperson, His Holiness. Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche also taught before they must definitely possess complete lay vows or higher. If a guru doesn't possess even one vow, then all qualities and realizations have no way to exist. Of course, individual very subtle Vajrayana vows and bodhisattva vows. If all are perfectly complete, this might be particularly rare in the degenerate age, but basic vows that don't obstruct one's own liberation, such vow essence must definitely be possessed. This is the first condition. The second condition is extensive learning, meaning proficiency in sutras, tantras, and treatises. If a guru understands nothing and is narrow-minded and ignorant, unable to even name sutras or tantras, this definitely won't work. They must know the major sutras of the Sutrayana and various tantras of the Mantrayana, and later instructions and practices composed by great masters on different theoretical points. For example, in Sutrayana, such as the 5 great treatises in Mantrayana, basic texts like the Guhyagarbha Tantra, if its great perfection instructions and practices from the different tantras of the great perfection. All of these should be understood. If nothing is understood, then the so-called guru probably cannot be called one. The qualifications are not complete. Third is possessing great compassion, loving all boundless sentient beings, like a mother loves her only child. Toward all sentient beings, not just one's own relatives and friends, those with whom one has good relationships, constantly caring for them, giving them wealth, position, everything. If relationships are bad, hating them to the bone, if there's truly no Mahayana, bodhicitta in the mind stream, not even ordinary worldly compassion and the character of a kind person, then great compassion is not complete. So one must definitely possess this loving kindness and great compassion. Fourth is mastery of Sutrayana and Mantrayana, mastery of the outer 3 Pitakas, the 3 Pitakas taught in Sutrayana, and the rituals of the inner 4 Tantra sections, Kriya Tantra, Charya Tantra, Yoga Tantra, and highest Yoga Tantra. That is, all the rituals and practices of Sutrayana and Mantrayana. Just talking verbally won't work. theoretically just talking a lot, blah, 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 but actually never actually practicing the practices, rituals, and teachings of Sutrayana and Mantrayana. This also cannot guide disciples. So one must definitely understand all the Sutrayana and Mantrayana rituals. This is the fourth qualification. The fifth qualification is actualizing abandonment and realization through practicing the true meaning, actualizing excellent abandonment and realization qualities in one's mind stream, relying on the instructions of gurus and the meanings taught in tantras and treatises to practice, finally having truly eliminated afflictions and obstacles in one's mind stream and actualized some realizations of selflessness. As a guru, basic afflictions must also be destroyed or suppressed, and many unprecedented qualities in the mind stream, at least regarding disciples in faith, compassion, wisdom, and various other qualities. Otherwise, now in the degenerate age, the disciples' faith and realizations are all quite good, while this so-called guru every day only clings to the 8 worldly concerns truly, whether in diligence or in many qualities that transcend the world, if they cannot compare to the disciples. This is truly a particularly laughable matter. These are the 5 qualities mentioned above. There must be some qualities of abandonment and realization, actualizing abandonment and realization, eliminating obstacles and actualizing the qualities of wisdom. The 6th is perfecting the 4 means of attraction. Through generosity, pleasant speech, beneficial action, and shared activity, the 4 means of attraction gather disciples with good karmic connections. As a teacher, his only method for benefiting sentient beings is first through material giving and dharma giving, then using Buddhist teachings to speak pleasant words. It doesn't mean constantly telling him stories about battles and other things he enjoys hearing. Some people say that so-called pleasant speech means whatever the disciple wants to hear is pleasant speech, but this isn't necessarily so. Some disciples who have particularly strong anger enjoy hearing battle stories every day, but this may not necessarily benefit them. So-called pleasant speech, as described in the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras, mainly refers to teachings about practice. It should be instructions related to cultivation. Then beneficial action means helping them, truly letting the disciple gain benefit. This can also be called beneficial action, truly allowing their mental continuum to be transformed. Otherwise, if this disciple is never managed or cared for, now in our worldly society, some people say, "You don't care about me," either because you haven't given me any material things or because you don't speak kind words to me daily and stay in constant contact. If you frequently contact them, then this person shows care for me. If you haven't given them anything but only taught them dharma, they consider it not caring, but this may be unreasonable. What should be called caring for them, helping them, is truly using Buddhist teachings and principles, which is most beneficial for them. Any other worldly behavior is ultimately meaningless for them. So this is called beneficial action. It can also be called beneficial conduct. Then shared activity means that as teacher, he himself must also practice, always telling others, you must cultivate selflessness and bodhicitta. You must definitely practice well. Don't be lazy or indolent while he himself sleeps in every day. This is simply saying one thing and meaning another, completely unreasonable. Telling others that all phenomena are selfless while never contemplating selflessness themselves. You must help sentient beings, benefit sentient beings, while never thinking in their own mental continuum that sentient beings are pitiful. In today's world, there are very many such people. Truly many. This cannot be called shared activity or beneficial action. Therefore, as a teacher, one should use the 4 means of attraction to gather disciples. The Treasury of Precious Qualities also explains this way. Those who perfectly possess all excellent characteristics are difficult to find in degenerate times due to the force of turbidity. Because possessing all characteristics is very difficult to obtain in degenerate times, the great earth of pure 3 vows, heart continuum moistened by vast learning and great compassion, mastering the ocean-like rituals of sutra and tantra, rich fruits of abandonment, realization, and pure wisdom. The 4 means of attraction bloom like flowers. Disciples with good karma gather like bees. Rigdzin Jigme Lingpa's Treasury of Precious Qualities often uses poetic embellishment to teach. The purity of the three vows is like the great earth, vast learning and mastery of Sutra and Tantra, vast. Learning is like rainwater falling on the earth, moistening it, then mastering the teachings of Sutra and Tantra, plus abandonment, realization, and pure wisdom. This is compared to ripened fruit. Using the four means of attraction to gather disciples with good karma produces flowers. In this way, disciples with good karma can gather like bees. The teacher is compared to a flower or a wonderful tree. For bees, as disciples to come, there must be a place to depend on. Otherwise, if the teacher has no earth, no flowers, no fruits, the bees will starve to death. Actually, there are more characteristics of a teacher. There is a scriptural reference in the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras. When I went to Mount Wutai in the past, I often had that teaching in my book folder, His Holiness. Jigme Phuntsok often quoted a Tibetan scriptural reference. I see that the content in the Chinese translation is basically the same. We can say the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras, which explains 10 characteristics. The scriptural reference for the 10 characteristics is explained this way: disciplined, peaceful, pacified, virtuous, increasing, courageous, rich in scripture, awakened to truth, skillful in teaching Dharma, deep compassion, free from discouragement. The first characteristic mentioned here is gentleness. The teacher needs to have gentleness and discipline, which corresponds to the training in discipline. That is to say, the teacher's own body, speech, mind, deportment, and behavior are disciplined through mindfulness and vigilance. If the teacher himself is not disciplined, there's no way to discipline disciples. If he himself is particularly crude and violent, singing and dancing every day, going to dance halls, it's impossible for him to gather disciples and make them peaceful. So this is the training in discipline. The first is being disciplined. The second is called peaceful. What is peaceful? It corresponds to the training in concentration. The teacher's own mental continuum and behavior are very peaceful, just like the deportment of monks that the Buddha taught in the Vinaya. Sometimes when we see certain people, we naturally develop faith in them. All three doors being peaceful corresponds to the training in concentration. Then the third, pacified, means eliminating confusion. This corresponds to the training in wisdom, that is, through mindfulness and vigilance, eliminating unwholesome behaviors in one's continuum, realizing the true nature of all phenomena. This is the third, corresponding to the training in wisdom. Then the fourth, virtuous increasing, means the teacher's virtue, his realization, his conduct should surpass the disciples. The disciples cannot surpass him. If disciples surpass him, they won't be convinced. So he must definitely surpass them in all aspects of realization. Virtuous increasing actually means superior, surpassing disciples. This is the fourth quality, virtuous increasing. Then the fifth is courageous, meaning not lazy, but diligent and energetic. Some teachers, after obtaining this position, are not diligent at all. They think they've already attained Buddhahood and are no longer diligent. In our worldly society, some people are very diligent as students. But when they get a job and obtain some position, they start becoming lazy. This won't work. For the benefit of sentient beings, the teacher himself should not have a weak heart, but must be diligent. This is the fifth. The sixth is rich in scripture, meaning abundant in teachings. Whether the teacher understands sutra or tantra teachings, there should be certain teachings in the continuum, including some realization and practice methods. Compared to ordinary worldly people, one should transcend them. If there's nothing at all in one's continuum, especially regarding the Tripitaka, if there's nothing at all in this regard, that won't work. This is the sixth. Then the seventh is awakened to truth. Awakened to truth means realizing the truth of all phenomena, which is emptiness and selflessness. Then the eighth, skillful in teaching Dharma. The teacher uses skillful and expedient language to expound the correct Dharma. Then the ninth is deep compassion. The teacher doesn't seek fame and gain, but wholeheartedly teaches correct Dharma to disciples. If he only has compassion, saying, "Oh, you're so pitiful. Eat well, dress well, sleep well. You can even sleep 24 hours a day." This doesn't necessarily show great compassion. One must plant seeds of liberation in the disciples' continuum. One must let them benefit from the Dharma to be considered having compassion. Then the 10th is free from discouragement, free from all weariness or fatigue of mind. courageously, whether regarding profound teachings or teachings on selflessness, not losing faith or diligence. Such a mental attitude, roughly like this. We haven't studied the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras for a long time. This is roughly the meaning, so when you have the opportunity, you can also look at this scriptural reference from the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras. A teacher must possess these 10 characteristics. Especially teachers who expound the pith instructions of Vajrayana Tantra must possess all the following conditions explained in the Tantric Treasures. The first is receiving uninterrupted empowerments that can ripen one's continuum. This is called ripening the continuum. The teacher must have received all empowerments from the lineage masters. Having received just one empowerment won't work. One must have properly and authentically received such empowerments with all conducive conditions for empowerment complete. This is the first second, not violating the vows and other precepts received during empowerment. During empowerment, different tantras have different vows. Then, from the time of receiving empowerment until now, never violating the basic root vows explained in Tantra. Like the 14 root precepts of Tantra and the 5 root precepts of the Guhya Garbha Tantra, none of these have been violated. This is called maintaining pure precepts. Third, weak afflictions and conceptual thoughts, meaning a gentle continuum. If a teacher has heavy afflictions every day, or particularly strong conceptual thoughts, constantly having wild thoughts, such a teacher is definitely even more unsuitable as a tantric teacher. How can there be a teacher with heavy afflictions? We often hear of disciples with heavy afflictions, but teachers with heavy afflictions. How can this be? Fourth is mastering all the meanings of the tantras on ground, path, and fruition of Vajrayana. The teacher must thoroughly understand all meanings of tantric ground, path, and fruition. If the teacher is unclear about what ground, path, and fruition mean, then what kind of teacher is this? This is mastering Tantra. Fifth is directly seeing deities and other signs of practice being perfect and complete. The teacher should preferably be one who has personally seen deities. If they haven't personally seen them, at least seeing deities in dreams or visions and their practice centered on deities, mantras, or signs have been perfected. The qualifications of a teacher who truly transmits Tantra or gives empowerments are indeed not easy. So sometimes when I guide everyone in some tantric texts and practices, I also feel ashamed and have told everyone I'm only planting good roots for everyone and connecting the lineage. As for all the qualities in my continuum, I can say not even one is complete, let alone having them all complete. It should be like this. So I myself have never thought that I possess the qualifications of a tantric teacher, let alone the qualifications of a tantric teacher. I don't even have the qualifications of a tantric disciple. So, as the precious treasury of pith instruction says, not having the qualifications of a disciple, yet wanting to be a teacher, is this truly rare or truly laughable? This meaning can appear in oneself. Sixth is directly realizing the meaning of ultimate reality and liberating one's continuum. One has already realized the principle of emptiness of all phenomena. As a teacher, one should have direct realization of this characteristic, especially those transmitting Tantra, especially tantric teachers giving empowerments, should have some realization of the meaning of selflessness. This is liberating the continuum. One's mind should have the state of liberation. Seventh is having one's mental continuum pervaded by great compassion, seeking only to benefit others. Mental continuum pervaded by great compassion, only seeking to benefit others, except for benefiting others. Generally, as a tantric teacher, if one is always for one's own benefit, then the qualifications are not complete. Eighth is abandoning attachment to this life's worldly concerns, with few trivial matters. For benefiting sentient beings, having some activities is acceptable, spreading the Dharma and benefiting sentient beings. Looking at the biographies of great masters in the past, many teachers also, for benefiting sentient beings and spreading the Dharma, had some activities. These aren't called trivial matters. So some of us now, including some volunteers, oh, I have too many trivial matters. Actually think about it. If it truly involves matters that benefit sentient beings, then this isn't called trivial matters. It should be very meaningful activities. If it's your own eating, drinking, and entertainment, washing vegetables every day, not for sentient beings, thinking every day about what to eat in the morning when you wake up in the morning, what to eat at noon after noon is over, what to eat in the afternoon, then at night, also dreaming about what to eat tomorrow morning. These are all trivial matters. These are meaningless. If serving in the dining hall for other Dharma friends, this activity also has meaning. Ninth is diligently remembering and practicing the Dharma for future lives. True practitioners don't think much about this life because they have cultivated the 4 thoughts that turn the mind away from samsara for future lives. They constantly remember the Dharma. This is called diligent practice. 10th is directly seeing the suffering of samsara and developing strong renunciation and encouraging others to also develop renunciation. This is called renouncing the world and encouraging others, because starting from the suffering of all samsara until the end, developing renunciation toward the entire world, after having such realization, one often teaches others and encourages them to see through worldly things. We often see Venerable Longchenpa, Mifam Rinpoche, Patrul Rinpoche, and many great masters from Han regions. When their practice reached a certain level, they wouldn't have good feelings toward the world, unlike some of us now who are full of confidence in the world. At a certain point, knowing that all activities ultimately have no real meaning, at this time they will share their realization and encourage others to also enjoy and share it. 11th is using various skillful means to gather and tame disciples. This is called gathering and subduing disciples, using various methods, whether through words or actions. As long as it brings benefit to the disciples' continuums, they will manifest various forms to guide sentient beings. 12th is practicing according to the Guru's instructions and possessing lineage blessings. This is called possessing blessings. They themselves also practice properly and authentically, doing whatever the Guru says, never violating the Guru's instructions through such interdependence. There are certain blessings in the continuum, continuous blessings in the continuum. A teacher with such blessings has completely different power in the Dharma they teach to disciples, because the power of lineage blessings is inconceivable. So as a teacher, one must have the blessings of the lineage. In total, there are 12 characteristics we should rely on such a teacher, as the Treasury of Precious Qualities also says, especially the teacher who expounds pith instructions, having received empowerment, pure vows, extremely peaceful, understanding the meanings of ground, path, fruition, tantras, practice and recitation perfect, realizing self-liberation, boundless compassion, only benefiting others, diligent in remembering Dharma, few trivial matters, extremely renounced and also encouraging others, skillful in lineage and possessing blessings. Relying on such a teacher, one swiftly accomplishes. If one relies on such a teacher with the 12 characteristics just explained, such a teacher, one can attain liberation. It seems, Gampopa said, if the many characteristics explained above are not complete, he mentioned 3 conditions. First is abandoning worldly trivial matters and worldly desires. Second is using great wisdom to lead disciples onto the path. Third is with great compassion, not abandoning disciples. Roughly these 3, that is, seeing through this life, great wisdom, great compassion. If a teacher possesses these 3 qualities, it's acceptable even in degenerate times, but especially if we want to rely on a tantric teacher, we must definitely examine them. And if the basic characteristics mentioned earlier are not complete, if you go to receive tantric teachings and empowerments, accepting such empowerments may not have great benefit. So before relying on a teacher, first examining the teacher's characteristics. This point is very important. Alright, today we'll stop here.
Sonandai Tantra Tobaya Tanani Dhamma Basi Tirgana Jirano Chupai Chupun Tulen Dwajah Bangarangara Banya Sadarda Bangarangara Banya Sadarda Bangarangara Banya Sadarda